The subject of today's video is one of the most intriguing and inspiring quarterbacks we've seen in quite some time. After not being able to make it work at his first school, he ended up transferring, waited his turn, and became an absolute superstar. Unfortunately, right before his biggest moment in college, he ended up suffering a gruesome injury, and he was so impactful that his team was left out of the college football playoff just because they were missing his presence. Yeah, we're talking about Jordan Travis. In today's video, we're to go through his story, talk about who he is, why he could have an impact in the NFL, and his inspiring tale. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Jordan Travis. In order to understand how Travis got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He was born in West Palm Beach, Florida in the year 2000 to a family of athletes. His older brother Devin was a really good baseball player, and he eventually ended up at Florida State and then played in the pros for the Toronto Blue Jays and is now the baseball coach for the GCL Braves of the minor leagues. Sports was something that was always going to be a huge part of his life as a younger kid, considering his family was super into it, but it originally seemed like he was going to follow in his brother's footsteps and end up a baseball player. Of course, as high school went on, it became clear that football was always going to be Jordan's sport. Jordan originally attended Palm Beach Central High School in Palm Beach in 2014, and as a freshman, he didn't play on their varsity team. Instead, he was on their freshman JV squad and was mainly used as a running back. In the off seasons, he focused on playing other sports like basketball, since there wasn't that much going on for football with him at the moment. It wasn't until his sophomore year at Palm Beach that he would eventually get an opportunity. In 2015, he put up 861 passing yards with 3 passing touchdowns and 8 interceptions. The team went 2-8 and mostly focused on the running game. I mean, Jordan really wasn't all that good. His role was either mostly to run the option or to hand it off to the running back, with the passing game only being used when the team was struggling. He had to play hero ball a lot, and that's why his numbers ended up not being that impressive. Both him and his family knew that if he wanted to end up playing football in college, they would have to move high school programs and get him in a system where he'd be more likely to succeed. So, after his sophomore year, he actually decided to transfer high schools to the Benjamin School in 2016. He instantly became their starting quarterback, and this was in a scheme that was much better suited for him than what he ran at Palm Beach Central. Instead of a run-focused scheme, it was closer to what would be run at major colleges in the NCAA, and the quarterback's role was expanded considerably from what he used to do. For the Benjamin Buccaneers that year, he threw for 2,017 yards and 21 touchdowns, and also ran for nearly 400 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. They ended up winning 8 games and reached the semifinal round of their conference playoffs. He would receive his first major offer in January after his junior year, as colleges were impressed with his massive improvement year to year. Marshall was the first school to offer him, followed by Southern Miss, Georgia State, and Appalachian State. His first Power 5 offer came from Louisville head coach Bobby Petrino, and that would come a day after he attended a camp at North Carolina. He decided he would commit to the Cardinals before even making an official visit there. The Cardinals at the time were led by one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football, Lamar Jackson. The prospect of becoming the next Jackson was intriguing to Jordan, and he decided to take his spot. During his senior year in 2017, he was looking like one of the more talented quarterbacks in his league. Before the year started, he said, quote, "Last year was like a demo year, testing everything out, and this year everything clicked. Receivers were catching the ball, and big guys were blocking up front. My main thing in the offseason was working on being a vocal leader and trying to lead the guys and give them confidence and make everyone better." How did he end up doing? Well, Jordan threw for 2,190 yards on 130 completions with 24 touchdowns. He also exploded on the ground for over 900 yards and 16 touchdowns, and this came on just 70 carries. The Benjamin School won 8 games in the regular season and ended up at the final round of the state playoffs for Florida. Jordan also became the 2017 Division IIIA Player of the Year and the Palm Beach Player of the Year. He received a ton more offers since then, with Baylor making a strong push for him at the start, but he eventually stuck with Louisville and head coach Bobby Petrino. By the time he graduated, he was considered a 3-star recruit in the class of 2018 and the 24th best dual-threat quarterback overall. So, how would Travis end up doing at Louisville? Well, let's take a look. When Travis would arrive at Louisville in 2018, he was actually the 3rd-string quarterback. Lamar Jackson was just drafted by the Ravens, and he was stuck behind both Jawan Pass and Malik Cunningham. Despite that, he was considered by Louisville insiders to be the most talented quarterback the Cardinals had, and the coaches decided to run with Pass and Cunningham instead of him. Mostly this was because of experience and seniority, since they knew the playbook much better. But the 2018 Cardinals were a complete mess, as they went 2-10 and lost every game in the ACC, with their only 2 wins coming against Indiana State and Western Kentucky. Since the two guys in front of him were struggling so much, the staff at Louisville put Jordan into a couple of games to try to find a spark. In 3 games at the Cardinals, he ended up going 4 of 14 for 71 yards and a touchdown, and also had an interception. On the ground, he added 40 yards on 8 carries. He decided he would need to get out of Louisville and find another place where he could play football from there. So, he went to Coach Petrino and said he was interested in transferring to another school. He announced this before the end of the season, and with 4 games left on the schedule, this left the Cardinals with just 2 other quarterbacks. Coach Petrino said, quote, "He talked about the possibility of getting closer to home and his family, and we agreed that it might be a better situation for him personally. Jordan is a terrific young man, and I wish nothing but the best from him in his college career." Soon after that, Jordan announced he was transferring. Also, Louisville fired Petrino, so he probably would have left at the end of the year anyways. This was way before the portal was such a huge thing, so there wasn't a great way to measure recruits in the portal, and there weren't really many rules. He'd have to sit out all of 2019 before he'd be able to play in 2020. But what's interesting is he transferred to Willie Taggart in Florida State, but they would have a coaching change as well, as they would go with Mike Norvell in 2020. But backing up a bit, when he got to campus in 2019, DeAndre Francois was released from the program, but Willie Taggart, the guy who wanted him there, was obviously fired after coaching just 9 games. They'd end up going 6-7, lost their bowl game to Arizona State, and Jordan was actually able to play right away because the NCAA gave him immediate eligibility. He ended up playing 4 games in 2019, but did not start any of them. He had 79 yards through the air and 228 rushing yards and 3 scores. As I said, to replace Taggart, Florida State looked to Memphis head coach Mike Norvell in 2020. Jordan immediately felt more comfortable with the coaches and the scheme in Norvell's system and said, quote, "My demeanor, my attitude, everything changed when they came. Even the way I acted around my parents, they could see a difference. Those guys instilled in me confidence and pushed me to get better each day." There were times where I'd go out and I think I couldn't throw the football 5 yards, and you just hear things and it gets in your head. Getting a coach that actually believed in Jordan as a prospect actually gave him a ton of confidence, and it showed up on the field. In 2020, Jordan would play in 8 games, starting 6 of them, throwing for 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 6 picks, while adding nearly 600 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. The Noles would end up going 3-6, and they'd have to rebound the next year with Jordan in the competition to start. He'd enter the 2021 season in the competition to be the starting quarterback, and he'd end up battling it out with Mackenzie Milton. Travis ended up winning the job for the majority of the season, and Coach Norvell said, quote, "I think you see the strides that Jordan Travis has made as a passer over the last year and where he is now. It's night and day from when he first stepped foot on campus, and he took great strides last year throughout the course of the season, but even that was limited in practice. At the time, Kenny Dillingham was his offensive coordinator, and he was super excited for what Jordan had become." In 2021, Travis would end up having a breakout season. In total, he ended up throwing for 1,500 yards with 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, with his best game coming in a win over North Carolina, as he had 5 total touchdowns in that one and over 300 combined yards. But he was by no means the fan favorite. After Mackenzie Milton had that gruesome injury at UCF, many wanted to see him play, and Jordan didn't exactly light up the stat sheet. FSU did improve to 5-7, and a lot of people thought that Norvell was in over his head and that Jordan Travis was awful. But in 2022, he'd end up exploding. The Seminoles would finish with a 10-3 record, and he would start all 13 games for him. Travis threw for 3,200 yards with 24 touchdowns and 5 picks, and added 7 more scores on the ground with over 400 yards. He also did this with a new offensive coordinator, as Kenny Dillingham had left and gone over to Oregon. FSU replaced him with Alex Atkins, who had been their offensive line coach until that point. Jordan announced that he was going to be returning for the 2023 season, and things in Tallahassee were looking extremely promising. Florida State and Jordan opened up the 2023 season with a win against LSU, and would finish the entire regular season undefeated. One of my favorite games was that Clemson game in Week 4, as he led them to an overtime victory in one of the toughest environments in college football. He also helped them beat number 16 Duke, had a close win over their rival Miami, and had a couple of really good performances. He was dubbed a low-key Heisman contender, and towards the end of the year, Florida State was undefeated, and it looked like they were going to end up making it to the college football playoff. But he'd only end up playing 11 out of the team's 13 games, and at the second to last game of the year, he suffered a horrible leg injury that forced his college career to be over, and some people think knocked Florida State out of the playoff. That obviously came against North Alabama, and after he went down, everyone was silent and Florida State was in shock. Luckily, they ended up blowing him out, and from there, Tate Rodemaker would take over, but he wouldn't end up playing either, and their true freshman Brock Glenn would also have to come in. Because of the eye test, despite beating a ranked team and an SEC team on the road, Florida State was left out of the 2024 college football playoff. In total, Travis finished with 2,700 yards, with 20 touchdowns and 2 picks, and 7 more scores on the ground. After the season was over, Jordan said, quote, "I wish my leg broke early in the season so you could see this team was much more than the quarterback." He did end up on the short list for the Heisman Trophy, but did not win and decided he would declare for the draft, even though he had no eligibility left. He was considered a first-team All-ACC selection, the ACC Offensive Player of the Year, and it was just a really sad story because he could never finish what he started. Despite how well he played, GMs were worried about his injury and his age, and he almost fell off draft boards entirely. He wasn't able to compete at the Senior Bowl or the NFL Combine, and when he did go to the Combine for interviews, he only weighed in at about 6'2" and 200 pounds. This was thin for the position and made his potential injury look even worse. Despite that, he did have 6 years of college football experience, was one of the more talented quarterbacks in the country when he was playing, and there were a few teams that considered him a lottery ticket. The Jets were one of them, and they ended up drafting him with the 171st overall pick in the 5th round of this year's draft. He's currently slated at 4th on the depth chart as he sits behind Aaron Rodgers, Tyrod Taylor, and fellow rookie Andrew Peasley. But if he stays healthy and looks like a solid option, it's possible to keep him on the roster. Since he's more dynamic and has more potential than Peasley, and since both Aaron and Tyrod are older, there's no reason not to keep Travis on the roster, even if he doesn't play at all in 2024. Since he was a later round pick, there aren't many people talking about him, but if he gets healthy, ends up rehabbing well, and can get back to his old self, Jordan Travis could potentially get a chance to play in the league. Aaron Rodgers has not been able to prove to stay healthy, and as we've said, the Jets have an older room, and then outside of those two, it's Travis. Maybe he gets his chance, and maybe he doesn't, but right now he could be the quarterback steal of the draft, just based on the fact he's going so under the radar. But what do you guys think? I really wanted to highlight Jordan Travis' story, talk about how he got to this point, and what his future in the NFL could look like. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below if you're a Florida State or a Jets fan, subscribe if you're new and love college football, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.